What language should people use when talking about autism? This is a question I'm getting asked in my last video. There have been numerous studies conducted that show that autistic adults overwhelmingly prefer identity-first language. So what does that mean? Identity-first language would be, I am autistic. They are autistic. Person-first language would be, I have autism. They are a person with autism. Why not person-first language? Well, the biggest criticism is that it makes it sound like whatever it is we're discussing is like a disease. In English, when we talk about things that inform facets of our identity, we use identity-first language. An example of this would be our height. So if I am tall, I would say, I am tall. If I were to use person-first language, I would say, I have tallness. Makes it sound like it's a disease. So similarly, if I say I have cancer, cancer is something that I don't want. It is a disease that is not a part of who I am that I want to get rid of. So in the same way, I am proud of my autistic identity. It is a part of who I am, and it is not something that I want to cure. I am autistic. I do not have autism. So let's go over some of the nuances of how these terms can be used. For instance, if you're talking about a group of people who are autistic, you could say, many autistics have sensory sensitivities. Or you could frame it as many autistic people have sensory sensitivities. Both autistics and autistic people is something that is accepted by the autistic community. So what about autistic community? There's some nuance here. Autistic community refers to autistic people. Autism community can refer to autistic people, or, depending on the context, may also include support people or families of autistic people. So it would be important to be clear on how you're using that term and what group of people you're referring to in your context. Generally, I would recommend using autistic community and referring specifically just to autistic people themselves. And then if you're going to reference people who work with people or are related to people who are autistic, then just reference them and their groups individually rather than including them in autism community. Now, what about on the spectrum? This is a term that there's a lot of different viewpoints on, but largely this term is used as a euphemism. It's a metaphor instead of saying the exact thing that it is, autism. As we've seen with other language in the disability community, euphemisms are often used by non-disabled people to take the sting out of what they feel may be offensive, but what is actually accurate. I also see a lot of autistic people use the term on the spectrum to refer to themselves to make other people treat them in less ableist ways. If someone is using it for themselves or their community, they should be allowed to do so, but in terms of media representation, we usually don't want to encourage people to use on the spectrum to identify autistic people. Just use autistic. So why doesn't the autistic community like the medical term autism spectrum disorder? Our medical framework is really based on a framework of ableism and has a lot of ties to eugenics. And so a lot of people have issues with the term disorder, especially when it's used to reference things in terms of mental health or the way our minds work. In a medical context, disorder is used as a means to say something is wrong in the way this is functioning. But most people in the autistic community feel that autism is a natural neurotype that should not be something that medicine is seeking to cure, but rather seeking to provide supports for. The neurodiversity model says that our diversity in how our minds work is actually a part of how humanity has survived over the years. This is a part of the natural diversity of human existence. Autistic people throughout history are a natural, evolutional part of how we have survived and thrived as humanity. In other words, it says that autism is a valid neurotype that is equal in value as any other neurotype. Many of us believe that the diagnostic manual that medicine uses should be reworked with a neurodiversity framework. One final bit of nuance, the autistic community is not a monolith, and there are a lot of people with a lot of different perspectives on this. So what we say as the community is to say, this is what we and the majority of us prefer. So please default to using identity-first language, etc. However, please know that there are others in our community that feel differently and want to be referred to differently. So when speaking with people, ask them what they prefer and use the language that they prefer for themselves. When speaking generally about the autistic community, we ask you to use the identity first language.